You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
Probably not, but I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. You know, they all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined, I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing, this country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been.
Now, my main issue is China, is how this country is just being taken advantage of by everybody. When I wrote The Art of the Deal back in around 1987 or 1988, it became the #1 bestseller for many, many weeks of that year. It was a big monster book. And a lot of people ask me, when I wrote that book, did I have any idea that someday I might be running for president? And the answer is absolutely not. The country was strong. The country was a much greater place than it is today. It didn't have the problems that we have today. It was respected more than anything else. It was respected by the world. So I certainly never even thought in terms of running for president. I'm thinking about it now for the opposite reason. We're not respected. We're going down. China's taking things over. They're taking our jobs. They're taking our money. And after they take our money, they loan it back to us and we pay interest. They're manipulating their currency, which makes it very, very tough for us to frankly compete in terms of our companies competing against them and their companies. And now I'm thinking about it very seriously, because this country has never been so low. We've never been at a low point like we are now. Well, now it's really happening. I pick up today's New York Times, the business section, and I read on the front page, China imposes new tariffs on U.S. vehicles. Look at that. Isn't that nice? China imposes new tariffs. They already have tariffs, but new tariffs. So here it is. The Chinese government increased trade tensions with the Obama administration Wednesday evening by unexpectedly imposing new tariffs on motor vehicles and different types of motor vehicles. The new tariffs totaling up to 22%. Think of it. We talk about free trade. These people aren't free traders. These people think we're so stupid. They think our leaders are the dumbest human beings on earth. How do we let them get away with it, folks? How do we let them get away with it? Here it is, New York Times, okay? You like the New York Times? You don't like the New York Times? China imposes new tariffs on U.S. vehicles. 22%! And we do nothing. We do nothing. It doesn't even make the front page of the New York Times. It makes the business section. Look, we're a bunch of fools, and we're being led by a fool.
Many people from China that I do business with, they laugh at us. They feel we're fools. They're making the products that we used to make in this country. They're making them in China. We're rebuilding China.
If you were president, what would be different?
Well, I do things very strongly. I tax China. They manipulate the currency. By manipulating the currency, it's very hard to compete with China. We have the cards because we're the ones that are spending all of this money in China.
And it always gets back to China, because while we're spending billions of dollars being policemen of the world, China is spending billions of dollars a day buying the world and calling us stupid. You know, I have a lot of friends. I just sold recently an apartment for $33 million to a Chinese gentleman. And I get to know a lot of guys and a lot of big people from China. And they look at me. This is before, you know, by the way, about 2 months ago, they stopped talking to me so much. You understand. They're saying, shit, do you believe we're talking to this guy? And now maybe something crazy could happen. They see these polls. But they sit there, and before I did this, they'd say to me, because they're sort of friends of mine, you know, and competitors, but friends. They're saying, Donald, we don't believe that your government allows us to do this. The one guy looks at me and says, are they stupid? And I say, absolutely, they're stupid. So, you know, I don't blame them. It's like if you make a bad business deal, if you don't know what you're doing, you have to blame yourself. I blame our leaders. Here we have China ripping this country off like nobody's ever seen before. And we have the president of China come a few months ago to Washington. And we give him a state dinner. Now, when people are screwing you, you don't give them state dinners. You don't do it. You heard my statement, right? I said, no, we're not giving dinners. What we do is we sit down in my office for a couple of hours. We either make a deal where you stop manipulating your currency or not. If we make a deal, you can have a state dinner if you want. If you don't make a deal, you take McDonald's and you go home. That's it. That's it. So we have problems. We have weak, pathetic leadership. We have incompetent leadership. Now, I'm going to make a decision fairly soon. And I would rather, you know, I love my life. Phil can tell you. I'm having a great time. I built a great company. I have a television show that's one of the top shows. It's the top show on NBC. It's the #1 show on NBC. It's doing great. I mean, I have to give a lot of stuff up. But you know what? It's peanuts compared to the importance of this country. And when I see what China is doing, I'll give you a little China story also. China, I said the other day, very, very hard to buy anything outside of China, or certain other countries also, but China's, you know, the one. And I said, somebody said, well, what would you do? What can you do? So easy. I drop a 25% tax on China. And you know, I said to somebody that it's really the messenger. The messenger is important. I could have one man say, we're going to tax you 25%. And I could say another, listen, you motherfuckers, we're going to tax you 25%. Now, you've said the same exact thing. You've said the same exact thing, but it's a different messenger. And I'll tell you what will happen with China, in my opinion. And I'm not looking to have enemies with China. You know, I actually get along. I'm a lover, not a fighter, okay? You've been reading about that for years. But when we have somebody that's real and tough and smart and sane, I'm saying smart. And you say to China, I'm sorry, we're going to have to put a 25% tax on your products. They'll say, when? I said, how about this evening? Not like, you know, everybody knows they're abusing us. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows they are manipulating their currencies. We're going to charge 25%. Now, the real number, based on the manipulation, it's so severe that the real number should be 45%. But 25, let's start with 25. We can always raise it. I'll tell you what's going to happen. When they believe the message, they don't believe it right now. When they believe the message, they're going to do one thing. They're going to give us anything they want. You know, when you go to China and you want to sell stuff in China, they make you build a plant and they take all your technology. When the Chinese sell to us, oh, just come on in, folks, we'll pay you whatever. We are so stupid. It's unbelievable. So under the Trump doctrine, it doesn't work that way. In China and other countries, they just burn whatever the hell is available, and that smoke is spewing out of those chimneys, and those factories are cheap as hell, and they don't give a shit. If I run, and if I win, we will have a rich country again. We'll have a great country again. And you know, in a certain way, what I almost like the most, we'll be respected as a country again, okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you or are you not going to run for the presidency? You're a straight talker. You don't take any crap. You tell it like it is. You've always been totally honest with me.
The country is doing very poorly. It just can't do much worse. We're not respected anywhere in the world. I am seriously thinking about it. I won't make a decision till June, but I will make a decision. And it may surprise people, frankly, but I will make a decision sometime prior to June. I love this country. I hate what's happened to this country. We're a laughingstock throughout the world. We're not respected. You look at what China's doing to us, how they're just ripping us left and right. They're taking our jobs. We're rebuilding China.
So let me assume that you're president for a moment, and I've got a funny feeling you are going to run. Assume you're president. What are the top priorities for President Trump?
Well, I think the first thing I do is announce very strongly that we're going to tax Chinese products, 25% tax on all Chinese products. They will come to the table immediately. They will stop manipulating their currency, which they're doing. It's very hard for our companies to compete with China because of the manipulation of their currency. I buy a lot of products. I'm building buildings all over the place. I buy glass and steel and lots of other things. It's very hard for our countries to compete with China. We make better products than them. By the way, that's the most important thing. We make better products. You look at their sheetrock, making people sick and killing people all over the country.
You see them as the enemy, don't you, China?
I see them as the enemy. Yeah.
See,
By the way, they know they're the enemy. They are the enemy. They say they're the enemy.
Yeah, but they're not an enemy in the sense of...
They want to take over this country economically.
But that's different to wanting to kill you, like an Al-Qaeda or something. Well, when I hear you say enemy, I think it's too strong a word. They're a business competitor who, at the moment, is out-competing America, aren't they?
They are not really out-competing. They're cheating. When you cheat, and we have people that don't know what to do because we have the wrong people in office, that's not out-competing.
I don't think that's the enemy. I think it's a potential business friend, isn't it? Can't we work with them?
I don't think they're friends. I think they're enemies. I deal with Chinese. I just sold an apartment to a Chinese person for $33 million a short while ago, a couple of months ago. I mean, I'm supposed to like the Chinese, but I understand the Chinese, and I deal with them all the time. Now, this is before they thought I might run for president. They consider our leaders extremely stupid people. They cannot believe what they get away with. Chinese are looking to put us under. And believe me, they are not our friends. The Chinese are looking to do damage to us economically. They're also building up a military. They're now starting their own aircraft manufacturing, which is going to be very bad for Boeing. I hate to use strong words, but that's what it is. And if you read the real economists and the real people that know what's going on, it's an unfair playing field. So here's what happens. You said, what would I do? I would immediately announce a tax of 25%. The first thing that's going to happen is the Chinese are going to call.
So you have a trade war?
We don't have free trade. You know, I believe in free trade, right? But we don't have free trade. We have very, very unfair trade. I call it unfair trade. I would tax them 25%. They would come to the table immediately. The other thing I'd do is I'd get our best business leaders. I wouldn't use the diplomats. I'd use the killers on Wall Street, of which I know every one of them. We have the greatest business people in the world, but we don't use them.
Before we go to a break, let me just put one thing to you. In business, you can be ruthless. I've seen it, and you're successful because of it. You kill competitors, don't you? Aren't the Chinese just behaving like Donald Trump? And don't we just need more people like you to compete with them?
You need people that know how to deal with the Chinese, and we don't have those people. The president of China comes in, we give him a five-star dinner at the White House. I don't give my people that are not fair to me five-star dinners. I wouldn't have given them a five. I would have said, come to my office, let's talk. And if we don't work out a deal, we send them to McDonald's and send them back.
Socialism promises prosperity, but it delivers poverty. Socialism promises unity, but it delivers hatred and it delivers division. Socialism promises a better future, but it always returns to the darkest chapters of the past. That never fails. It always happens. Socialism is a sad and discredited ideology rooted in the total ignorance of history and human nature, which is why socialism eventually must always give rise to tyranny, which it does. Socialists profess a love of diversity, but they always insist on absolute conformity. We know that socialism is not about justice. It's not about equality. It's not about lifting up the poor. Socialism is about one thing only: power for the ruling class. And the more power they get, the more they crave. They want to run healthcare, run transportation and finance, run energy, education, run everything. They want the power to decide who wins and who loses, who's up and who's down, what's true and what's false, and even who lives and who dies.
My administration recently announced that we will not lift sanctions on the Cuban government until it makes fundamental reforms. We have also imposed tough, calibrated sanctions on the socialist Maduro regime in Venezuela, which has brought a once thriving nation to the brink of total collapse. The socialist dictatorship of Nicolas Maduro has inflicted terrible pain and suffering on the good people of that country. This corrupt regime destroyed a prosperous nation by imposing a failed ideology that has produced poverty and misery everywhere it has been tried. To make matters worse, Maduro has defied his own people, stealing power from their elected representatives to preserve his disastrous rule. The Venezuelan people are starving, and their country is collapsing. Their democratic institutions are being destroyed. This situation is completely unacceptable, and we cannot stand by and watch. As a responsible neighbor and friend, we and all others have a goal. That goal is to help them regain their freedom, recover their country, and restore their democracy. I would like to thank leaders in this room for condemning the regime and providing vital support to the Venezuelan people. The United States has taken important steps to hold the regime accountable. We are prepared to take further action if the government of Venezuela persists on its path to impose authoritarian rule on the Venezuelan people. We are fortunate to have incredibly strong and healthy trade relationships with many of the Latin American countries gathered here today. Our economic bond forms a critical foundation for advancing peace and prosperity for all of our people and all of our neighbors. I ask every country represented here today to be prepared to do more to address this very real crisis. We call for the full restoration of democracy and political freedoms in Venezuela. The problem in Venezuela is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented. From the Soviet Union to Cuba to Venezuela, wherever true socialism or communism has been adopted, it has delivered anguish and devastation and failure. Those who preach the tenets of these discredited ideologies only contribute to the continued suffering of the people who live under these cruel systems. America stands with every person living under a brutal regime. Our respect for sovereignty is also a call for action. All people deserve a government that cares for their safety, their interests, and their well-being, including their prosperity. In America, we seek stronger ties of business and trade with all nations of goodwill. But this trade must be fair and it must be reciprocal. For too long, the American people were told that mammoth multinational trade deals, unaccountable international tribunals, and powerful global bureaucracies were the best way to promote their success. But as those promises flowed, millions of jobs vanished and thousands of factories disappeared. Others gamed the system and broke the rules. And our great middle class, once the bedrock of American prosperity, was forgotten and left behind. But they are forgotten no more, and they will never be forgotten again. While America will pursue cooperation and commerce with other nations, we are renewing our commitment to the first duty of every government, the duty of our citizens. This bond is the source of America's strength and that of every responsible nation represented here today. If this organization is to have any hope of successfully confronting the challenges before us, it will depend, as President Truman said some 70 years ago, on the independent strength of its members. If we are to embrace the opportunities of the future and overcome the present dangers together, there can be no substitute for strong, sovereign, and independent nations. Nations that are rooted in their histories and invested in their destinies. Nations that seek allies to befriend, not enemies to conquer. And most important of all, nations that are home to patriots, to men and women who are willing to sacrifice for their countries, their fellow citizens, and for all that is best in the human spirit. In remembering the great victory that led to this body's founding, we must never forget that those heroes who fought against evil also fought for the nations that they loved. Patriotism led the Poles to die to save Poland, the French to fight for a free France, and the Brits to stand strong for Britain. Today, if we do not invest ourselves, our hearts and our minds in our nations, if we will not build strong families, safe communities, and healthy societies for ourselves, no one can do it for us. We cannot wait for someone else. This is the true vision of the United Nations, the ancient wish of every people, and the deepest yearning that lives inside every sacred soul. So let this be our mission, and let this be our message to the world. We will fight together, sacrifice together, and stand together for peace, for freedom, for justice, for family, for humanity. and for the Almighty God who made us all. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the nations of the world. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.